Hello, and welcome to Mystery Road. My name is Taylor.
And my name is Donovan. Mystery Road is a monthly podcast that examines the dark, strange, and unknown.
Want more updates on the show? Follow us on Instagram at Mystery Road Pod. Have suggestions and ideas for future shows? Email us at mysteryroadpod@gmail.com.
Help support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/Mystery Road Pod. Now, let's take a stroll down Mystery Road.
Welcome back to Mystery Road. I am your host, Taylor, and as always, joining me today is my co-host, Donovan.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We are back with episode 3 and are excited to be exploring what has been dubbed the most haunted hotel in America, the Crescent Hotel, located in Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
In order to really understand and grasp the horrific events that took place at the Crescent Hotel, we must first examine the history and background of where the hotel is located. In 1856, Dr. Alva Jackson heard about springs in the Ozark Mountains that had healing powers through the Osage Native American tribe. Dr. Jackson soon after decided to bring his son to the Miracle Springs in hopes of healing his son's ocular ailment. Dr. Jackson believed in the power of the springs and soon found himself calling the area home. He later opened a hospital called Dr. Jackson's Cave Hospital. Dr. Jackson used this hospital to help Civil War soldiers from both sides of the war. He would help cure soldiers with minor ailments using the healing powers of the streams. However, during this time, anesthesia and pain medication were not an option, and the soldiers that would be brought to the hospital with mangled or missing limbs needed immediate surgery. These surgeries were often performed with archaic surgical tools and more often involved the amputation of limbs. The soldiers would undergo surgeries completely awake, experiencing excruciating pain until they passed out. The torture these soldiers went through continues to linger in the small mountain town today.
In the spring of 1879, Dr. Jackson invited Judge Levi Bess Saunders to come and try out the spring water for a skin disease he had. The spring water soon healed Judge Saunders, and he too found himself setting up camp and calling the area home. 20 more families followed the lead of Judge Saunders and set up their own campsites nearby. Buck Saunders, Judge Saunders' son, suggested calling the settlement Eureka after Juan Ponce de Leon's exclamation, meaning, "I have found it." On July 4th, 1879, the small settlement became an established town when Judge Saunders built the first home and named the town Eureka Springs. By the end of 1879, the population quickly rose to 4,000 people. Due to the popularity of the healing springs, the Crescent Hotel, known by locals as the Crescent, was built in 1886 by the Eureka Improvement Company.
The Crescent cost $294,000 to build, roughly $963,306 today. The hotel sits on 27 acres that overlook the valley with large rooms, luxurious furniture, and private bathrooms. Built for the rich to come and enjoy the local springs. The Crescent was built with unique White River stone and magnesium limestone local to the area. The stone is dense, which made it harder to construct due to the cuts and the fitting of each stone having to be precise. Osage legend states limestone and sandstone are said to be conductors for the dead. While in the process of building the Crescent Hotel, the first tragic death occurred. One of the most famous and oldest ghost stories associated with the Crescent is of Michael. Michael was a former Irish stonemason who worked on the hotel during its construction in the late 19th century.
Legend has it, Michael fell to his death while working on what is now Room 218. Room 218 is known to be one of the most active sites at the hotel, with dozens of guests claiming to have seen Michael. Guests have reported hands coming out of the bathroom mirror towards them, cries of a man falling from the ceiling, doors slamming shut, and having a hard time opening those doors after they had slammed.
During the earlier years of the hotel, there was a lady staying on the 3rd floor where she ultimately fell 3 stories down from her hotel balcony. It is unknown if the woman fell by accident, if the woman was pushed out the window, or if she committed suicide. Guests have reported seeing the woman in the window when they are looking up at the 3rd story from the outside. Guests have also reported when the grounds in the area get foggy, you can see the woman in the fog walking towards you. One of the more unique anomalies about the third floor is that guests have often experienced lightheadedness, vertigo, and fainting spells, leading most to believe the lady on the third floor did actually faint and fall to her death.
Nothing is more uncommon these days than seeing a lady in old Victorian clothing, but not at the Crescent. Although no one has been able to identify who this apparition is, multiple guests have reported seeing a lady in Victorian clothing who doesn't appear quite human. It is thought the spirit is of a woman who stayed at the hotel during its early years when it was a luxury resort. Guests have reported seeing the lady in Victorian clothing in the crystal dining room. One year, while the dining room was closed for the holiday season, workers found that the Christmas tree and presents underneath were moved from one end of the room to the other, along with chairs being moved into a circle around the Christmas tree. Employees have also reported that she scatters the menus throughout the room. A waitress at the hotel abruptly quit after witnessing one of the scariest encounters anyone at the hotel has experienced. She was alone working in the dining room when she noticed what looked to be a bride and groom facing each other. The groom then turned and looked at the waitress, but not before fading away into thin air.
In 1905, a man named James Everett, the groundskeeper at the Crescent Hotel, noticed another man, John Howerton, getting into a heated argument with a woman. James decided to intervene as John struck the woman with a chair, attempting to separate the two. However, John was insulted that a man from Cuba would try to stand in the way of him and the girl, resulting in John pulling his pistol on James. James then ran in an attempt to get to safety when John shot him twice in the back, killing him. Guests have reported seeing the ghost of James walking on the grounds at night. He is said to have no interaction with the guest and that his body will appear, then disappear, as if roaming the grounds, unaware he has moved on to the other side.
By the early 1900s, the economy began to worsen and the population decreased, resulting in the Crescent reducing operations to the summertime only. In 1908, the Eureka Springs Investment Company decided to take this opportunity to use the hotel from September to June as an elite girls' boarding school, named the Crescent College and Conservatory for Young Women. The school was open from 1929 to 1933 when the Crescent closed its doors for 4 years. That was until 1937, when it was bought by Dr. Norman Baker. This time, the Crescent would change from a hotel to the Baker Cancer Clinic.
Born in Iowa in November of 1882, Norman was the youngest of 10. He dropped out of high school after his sophomore year and spent his early adult years as a trampoline machinist with the circus. While he worked at the circus, Norman witnessed a vaudeville magician act and knew what he wanted to have for his next adventure. He started his own traveling group that starred Madame Pearl Tangley, a mind reader.
After 10 successful years on the road, Norman decided to head back to his hometown in Iowa. In 1925, he created the radio station Know the Naked Truth, KTNT, which focused on rural and small town issues. Baker also supported President Hoover's campaign on his station, where he would talk poorly about Hoover's opponent, Al Smith. Due to his outspoken behavior, his radio station began to grow in popularity all over the nation.
In 1929, during his time on the radio, Norman criticized the American Medical Association, claiming he had all the cures for cancer. Although he had no formal training, Norman opened a small 100-bed hospital in Iowa called the Baker Hospital and Health Resort. The hospital was staffed mainly with chiropractors, osteopaths, and physicians whom all had no training with any form of cancer. In 1931, the AMA convinced the Federal Radio Commissions to shut down his radio station, which also caused the hospital to lose business. Norman soon packed up after this and left the country to live in Mexico.
After a few years in Mexico, Norman decided to move to Eureka Springs, where he purchased the Crescent. The town had hoped that Norman would bring back life into the small community and spur the economy. He continued his claims of being able to cure cancer and used the basement of the Crescent to serve as a morgue for patients who could not be saved. The morgue remains intact at the hotel to this day. In 1940, Norman was arrested for mail fraud and served a few years in prison. After his release, he did not return to the Crescent.
One of the most famous ghostly encounters associated with the Crescent Hotel is the ghost of Theodora, a cancer patient who died at the hotel during its time as a fraudulent cancer hospital. Theodora's ghost is said to haunt room 419, where she stayed during her treatment. Guests have reported feeling her presence in the room, with some saying they have felt her sitting on the bed or touching them. Guests have also reported exchanging pleasantries with her, where she would then vanish only to be seen when she chooses. Guests who have stayed in room 419 have also reported having their luggage stacked up against the door from the inside of the room, causing a difficult and somewhat noisy time getting back into their room.
Of course, we can't forget about the ghostly nurse, who is said to have worked at the hotel during its time as a cancer hospital. Guests have reported seeing her walking the halls in her old-fashioned nurse's uniform, pushing an old-style squeaky gurney down the halls, or standing at the foot of their beds while they sleep, watching them as if they were patients. I think it's worth noting the details individuals have reported when encountering this nurse, hearing the sounds of her ghostly equipment, seeing her in her work duties, and watching over her patients. Although extremely creepy and unnerving, it says a lot about who this individual was and what was important to her, her work, her patients, and their health. Even though Dr. Norman Baker was a snake oil salesman, it's unknown how many were in on the con and how many thought they were truly helping save lives.
Guests have also reported seeing the apparition of Norman Baker himself near the elevators in front of room 209. His ghost appears leaving the elevators, walking the hall only to disappear into the door of his old office. Norman also had a house near the hotel through the woods. The house is not owned by the hotel and is privately owned, but there has also been reports of ghostly hauntings there from several of the owners, including the current one.
The woods between Norman's house and the Crescent are said to also have strange paranormal sightings. Guests have reported seeing eyes peeking out at them through the bushes. Additionally, multiple guests have reported seeing strange-looking animals and hearing noises in the woods. Room 312 is another popular haunted room, and it has rightfully been nicknamed the Pain Asylum by some of the hotel workers. During Norman Baker's time at the hotel, when medicine would no longer expel or even dull the pain from suffering cancer patients, they would be taken to this room. This room is where those patients would eventually see their demise. It is rumored that Norman Baker decided to move terminal patients there so that other patients would not witness what would soon be their fate. Guests have reported that in this room they can often hear screams and cries of former patients who suffered excruciating pain before dying. Guests have also reported experiencing headaches and body aches from staying in this room for too long, as if through death the patients are passing along their pain to the living in an attempt to get justice for their suffering.
In October of 2019, while doing some grounds work, the maintenance crew found some very interesting buried items that were eventually linked back to the time of Norman Baker. The hotel reached out to the local archaeologist department to come out and help unearth the items they located.
There were a total of 500 jars found on the grounds, some filled with human body parts. They also found some old anatomy and cancer posters. Video films that Norman had buried were also found. The films contained videos of Norman providing care to his patients, and others showed the sadistic side of Norman in the morgue autopsying the bodies of patients who did not survive.
Some of the jars are now on display at the Crescent Hotel, including some of the jars found with herbs and elixirs Norman used to help patients. However, not all the jars were able to be displayed due to some of them containing human remains of patients that Norman would do research on after their demise.
In 1946, the hotel was purchased again by 4 investors: Herbert Byfield, John Constantine, Dwight Nichols, and Herbert Shutter. With the new management, they were determined to make the Crescent a luxury hotel, Working with the Frisco Railroad, they were able to bring new tourists to Eureka Springs. The hotel was thriving for the first year, with a new hope in the atmosphere. Politicians often used the Crescent for birthdays, weddings, and even political events.
However, the hotel had a very tragic incident that happened in 1947 when a family came to stay at the hotel for a vacation. During their visit at the hotel, their child fell ill and his appendix erupted. The family was unable to find adequate care for the child, resulting in his passing. There have been several guests who have reported seeing the ghost of a little boy who runs around the hotel causing mischief and playing games. There is a famous picture that has been posted to the Crescent's Facebook page by a person who had taken it during their ghost tour, which depicted a ghostly figure of a little boy in a blue outfit on the 4th floor. The picture has not been authenticated, but is rather remarkable and worth a search. For 21 years, the hotel was back to life, until 1967 when a fire broke out on the 4th floor due to faulty wiring. Dwight Nichols, being the only living owner left, decided it was time to sell the hotel.
In 1997, Mary and Elise Roenick bought the hotel and remain the current owners to this day. The hotel was renovated in sections so guests were allowed to see the past and the present of the hotel. What's interesting is the hotel embraces its paranormal reputation and offers ghost tours and paranormal investigations for those who are interested in learning more about its spooky past.
The Crescent has also been a hotspot for paranormal investigators and even major TV networks. One of the paranormal investigator groups made their way out to the Crescent Hotel in October of 2005. The Ghost Hunters, also known as TAPS, on the Sci-Fi Channel, were invited to do a full investigation on the hotel and were also invited to the house of Norman Baker. Two of the investigators were down in the morgue with a thermal camera when they picked up what appeared to be an outline of a stonemason with his hat on. The most interesting, and in my opinion, overlooked detail of this encounter was the number 2 on the locker where the apparition appeared. It glowed red on the thermal camera as if it was hot. However, the apparition of what is thought to be Michael was green or room temperature. Overwhelmed by the evidence they found, the crew tried everything they could to recreate what they saw, including retracing their steps and attempting to recreate the exact scenario in case it was one of the investigators' reflections. However, neither investigator was seen wearing a hat during the investigation, and even with putting a hat on, they were unable to recreate what they had captured.
The crew also took the time to investigate the house of Norman Baker, where paranormal activity is also known to happen according to previous and current owners. The current owner of the home in 2005 invited the TAPS crew in to see if they were able to find evidence that the house was haunted. Although they did not produce any evidence of paranormal activity, what they did find was extraordinary. The owner at the time was a self-proclaimed medium and had stated he often talks to the spirits of the house. As they were sitting down with the owner of the property, weird visuals began to occur on their thermal cameras, as if one of the investigators' energy was flowing into the owner's body as he performed a psychic read on him. The episode is a great watch if you're interested in checking it out. It's The Ghost Hunters, Season 2, Episode 13 on Sci-Fi.
In 2019, the famous Ghost Adventures TV show featured on the Travel Channel was invited to the hotel to do their own investigation on the paranormal activity that takes place in the hotel. This time, however, they were able to investigate the hotel as a lockdown. No other guests were allowed at the hotel during the time they were investigating, giving them full range to each room that is claimed to be haunted. Zach Baggins, one of the main characters, took it upon himself to be in the room 312, the pain asylum. He is said to experience bad headaches and sadness, causing him to not be able to stay in the room for long.
The crew also experienced the mischief of Thedora in room 419. During the investigation, one of the crew members was set to stay in the room to be able to conduct paranormal research. The crew set up cameras and left the room to finish the investigation set up around the hotel. Upon their return to room 419, the crew had issues gaining access due to their luggage being stacked behind the door. Although the cameras were unable to catch the movement of the bags, it was still a strange and spooky event that occurred with no human in the room. You can find the episode on the Travel Channel. It's Ghost Adventures, Season 18, Episode 7.
With the dreary history of the Crescent Hotel, the death that surrounds it, and the frequency of ghostly sightings and unexplainable events, the Crescent Hotel has rightfully earned the title of the most haunted hotel in America. Experts are unsure why this hotel has so many ghostly sightings, but some believe it's due to the stones that the hotel is made of. Maybe the hotel keeps a hold of the ones who are lost at their untimely and unjust demise.
That's it for this episode. Thank you all very much for taking the time to listen to our podcast. Next month, we'll be traveling across America to investigate strange and unexplained disappearances that occur in America's national parks in mass numbers. If you like our content, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Mystery Road Pod. Also, consider donating to our show at patreon.com/Mystery Road Pod or on our Buzzsprout page. If you have ideas for future shows, email us at mysteryroadpod@gmail.com. Links will be in the show notes.